Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert. You're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Paulette Rigo. Paulette is the 1% that endured an 8.5-year litigated divorce trial and full appellate process. Her case became well known, and hundreds of women reached out to her for support, advice, and guidance. She co-directed a performing arts studio for 20 years, a modeling agency, created registered yoga school, and trained yoga practitioners to become registered teachers, and owned and directed a 2,600 square foot aerial yoga studio, retreat center, and spa for a curio collection by Hilton Hotel in Belize. She is also a birth doula, macrobiotic and Ayurvedic counselor, and founder of Better Career Project, as 70% of the women who are lucky enough to get child support and alimony lose it at some point and have no plan B. She helps them create sustainable, viable businesses that allow them to live their best life ever. Welcome to the podcast, Paulette.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the gracious invitation.
Yes. And I know you have your own podcast and are doing a lot of really amazing things in the world. So I'd really like to get into that and let people know who you are.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to start at the beginning, I suppose. And I know my bio is a little bit diverse, as I am. I am one to reinvent myself. So never fear, listeners, if you feel like you're in a place where it's just no longer a good fit, or the work or the life that you're living no longer feels like it's in alignment with who and what you are now, because let's face it, we change. We are not the same person we are when we're born. I mean, yes, the DNA is the same. Yes, we still have the same color eyes, and well, there's always those contact lenses, right? But we evolve, we grow, we're meant to transform and change and evolve and into a new, more improved, better version of ourselves. It's when we stay stuck, trapped in a position where we don't feel like we're growing, that life really starts to lose its meaning. So with that said, I've done a lot of interesting things, not because I said to myself, gee, I'm bored, I think I need to do something different and shake it up, but I did it out of necessity of either survival or a lot of self-study. As Kimberly, had mentioned in my bio, I have a diverse background in wellness, but let's just face the work I'm doing now is exceedingly different. But I grew up in Boston. My family was Paul, Paulette, Pauline, Paula, Paulette. I know that sounds like I just made that up. I wish I had, but it just gives you the foundation of just how dysfunctionally weird things were with the names, and which leads to identity. And if you really don't feel like you have an identity, regardless of what your family's names are, it leads you down a road to feel very confused. But I wanted to be Jane Pauley. I don't know if any of you are old enough to know who the hell Jane Pauley is, but she's a 70-year-old journalist that really paved the way for females in journalism. And when I was a little girl, say 4 to 14, my mother was addicted to the Today Show. And I say addicted, half-heartedly, but really there was not a day, Monday through Friday, where I did not hear at 6:59 the television getting turned on, and then of seeing the peacock and welcome to the Today Show. I think I could probably even fake that intro. And Jane Pauley was the host, along with Brian Gumbel and many others over the years, and Barbara Walters and all that. But I saw her as this beacon of light. She was intelligent, funny, pretty, but not beautiful. She was just kind of quirky, she always made me know what was going on. She always wanted to educate me, make me have a better day. And when I was a little girl, I was like, I love her. What is she doing? I want to be her. But my mother owned a rather well-known performing arts studio and she would have nothing of it. I was a junior, so my name being Paulette, I was Paulette Junior, which of course led to more confusion with who the hell I was. So my mother wanted me to be a dancer and take over the dance studio and be a part of that legacy of having this family bit legacy, as she used to call it. So I did graduate from Northeastern University with a degree in mass communication and journalism, and did have a career in TV, radio, and marketing briefly. But I was vacuumed into the family business quickly at about age 19, 20, when I received a phone call from her, and my mother started every sentence with, "Would you be good enough?" So the sentence went something like, "Would you be good enough to sub Penny's classes for her while she's out on maternity leave?" And I had been dancing my whole life. I'm 20 years old, but I didn't want to do that. But I could feel my arm being twisted right out of the socket, going, "Ugh, okay." And I even remember, saying, "Well, I think I have a class on Tuesday afternoons. I'm not sure I can do that." And she said, "Well, you'll just see what you can do to change that." And of course, when someone, particularly your mother, starts a sentence with, "Would you be good enough?" and you say no, well, therefore, you're not good enough, right? So I pretty much always was a people pleaser and said, yes, 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 yes. And don't you worry about it. I'll take care of everything. And of course, I didn't say that verbally, but in my soul, I felt like, I'd better do that. And both my parents had a pretty bad drinking problem. My father was the happy drinker. My mother was the closet drinker. So it was a little bit of a mixed message for me as a child, that I, needed to, my dad was more of like the extrovert and my mom was more the introvert, but yet she was a dancer. But here I was running the business with her. I never took it over fully. She would not have that. And I didn't really want it. It was, again, not a career I yearned for. So 20 years later, I was still there at the ripe old age of 38, running the business with her, and grew the business to a very financially and more of a legacy than it was, because I just don't do anything half-assed, as I was taught mostly from my grandmother and my mother. I came from a long line of successful serial female entrepreneurs. So I just knew that whatever I could do, whatever I did, I would be successful in it. But when you get those messages, right, that you're just not, where am I? What am I doing? So at the ripe old age of 17, I met this charming young man, or so I thought. We fell madly in love, although I had another boyfriend at the time, but that's another story. And at the age of 22, turning 23, I married him. He didn't ask me to marry him. He told me to marry him. And it was just one of those things that was on my list of things to do. We all as young girls have that list. It's something like, wear a princess nightgown, go to ballet, do well in school, get into college, find the man of your dreams, get married, have babies. And there's probably 9 more things on the checklist, but it was like, check, 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 check. And I realized that every single thing I checked didn't, again, feel like me. But I was just putting on that face. And dancers also typically have this habit, as we're taught, to never let them see you sweat. The show must go on. Break a leg. There's a lot of other theater sayings. Anyone out there who's a dancer, an actress, a musician, trust me, you know all that stuff. So, by the age of 32, I found myself married for 10 years. I had 3 children, was living in a 10,000 square foot home, and had no idea what the heck I was doing or how I got there. In fact, there's a song by Talking Heads, and it's Once in a Lifetime. And the lyrics go something like, "This isn't my beautiful life. This isn't my beautiful house. How did I get here?" And I remember hearing that song thinking, oh my God, how the hell did I get here? Because I had always let everyone else make my decisions for me instead of stepping into my power, really tuning into what that meant and making my decisions for me in alignment with what was right, even to the effect that I'd let people order my meals for me. And what do you want for dinner? And what's your favorite color? And all those things. As soon as I said yellow, my mother was like, no, it's pink. It was just, I never felt like I could have a voice. And I'm not blaming my mother. I'm not blaming my husband or anyone. I allowed other people to make those decisions for me. This isn't a finger pointing. I take full responsibility for the demise of my own, precursor of the early parts of my life. So to digress just a bit, but not really, it's all congruent. Here I was in a career that did not feel like it was in alignment with who I was. And I was there 20 years and I dedicated my life to it and did it well. I was also married for 20 years and dedicated my life to being the best mother and wife I could. I was not great at it, but I did my best. And finally, at the age of 37, I found the courage to quit my job. My mother was not thrilled. She didn't talk to me for a year. I did give her my 2 years notice, not 2 weeks, but 2 years notice. I trained all the teachers to take over my spots. I was teaching about 25 classes a week, and it was a full-time job, but it just was killing me. I was super skinny. I lived on Diet Coke and Snickers bars. I was miserable. Just living in a very world of being numb and drained. My body hurt, my brain hurt. I just felt like I was drained and running on empty. So finally, I had the courage to quit the career, and it took me about 6 or 7 more years to find the courage to file for divorce. I knew nothing about divorce. Although my grandmother had divorced my mother's biological father when she was very young, and she thrived and got remarried. And I thought, see, if she can do it, I can do it. My parents stayed married. There's a whole cliche out there, staying together for the children. I don't always recommend that. So children typically know that mom and dad are miserable and faking it and really are living a lie, shall I say, or a facade. And that eats away at so many people. And I typically see people get deeply ill, either with cancer, inflammation, something that ends in the term itis, and is quite miserable. So in 2008, we did do counseling. We talked about it. And no matter what, I just felt like continuing in this marriage would be damaging to both him, the children, and myself. So I did file for divorce. But 3% of divorces end up in a litigated trial. And of that 3%, only 1% end up in a appellant court process. And I, Kimberly, am the 1%. So I had a 12-day trial that took place over 9 months. And then after that, which was a good 4.5 years, there was all the way to the Massachusetts Supreme Appellate Court process. And family court is very different than the appellate court. They have nothing to do with one another. Family court is custody, adoptions, family law matters, divorce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's it. Appellate court takes all the cases in the state, if it's a state Supreme Court, or the country, if it's a countrywide, federal court, and takes the cases that someone has appealed, either because they're dissatisfied with the decision or something went awry. Well, that process was 4 years for me. So between February of 2008 and July of 16, I was involved in an 8.5-year fully litigated appellate court process. And it changed everything about who I am, the work I do, how I view life. And my case became, as you mentioned in the bio, pretty well known. I was running a teacher trainings at the time and had a large following. And as I've learned, a very large percentage of people that enroll in yoga and yoga teacher trainings are reevaluating their relationships and marriages. I don't think they consciously know that, but word up, they are. So because of that, so many of my students from the ballet school had said, I heard about your divorce. I can't believe you're not divorced yet. And now these young women were in their 20s and 30s. I was in my 40s and almost 50s. So, and I had watched these young women grow up from 3 to 18, and I was pretty much in many ways their mother and their mentor. And they said, my relationship is failing. Can you help me through this? So between the dance world and the modeling world and the yoga world and the wellness world, I was also a birth doula. I knew a lot of women and still do. So they had reached out to me. Of course, all of them came to me from different areas of life and said, can you help me? I heard about your divorce. And being who I am, I invited them over, not all at the same time, made a lot of coffee, poured a lot of wine, and listened to a lot of stories. And over the 8.5 years of being in court, I witnessed over 200 divorces being fulfilled and granted. And I was jealous. I was like, can I do that? I mean, why is I taking so long? I didn't know that there was even the possibility of a mediation, really. I thought that you just got a lawyer and this is what you did. And we tried mediation, but if both sides do not fill out the financial statements and are not willing to be transparent, unfortunately, mediation is not an option. So because of that, I took a lot of notes. It ended up being a memoir, and I am the author of Better Divorce Blueprint, which is also just that, a culmination of all of those years of learning, research, expertise. But I called my lawyer and I said, I'm getting a lot of people reaching out to me. I don't feel prepared and I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing. Should I go to law school? And we laughed. And after spending 8.5 years with somebody, let's just say we got to know each other quite well. And he said, Paulette, you'd be one heck of a litigator. You should consider it. And I think there were a few choice words there shared. And I said, yeah, that's your job. But he said, you should consider becoming a mediator and a divorce consultant. And I said, wait, that's a thing? And so he introduced me to someone that was retiring from that work. And as I mentioned, I don't do anything halfway. I did all the mediation training, all the certifications, education, mentoring, that I needed to do and wanted to do to be able to feel equipped to walk people through, not using my personal journey, which does give me a foundation in which to help people through the process more eloquently, wiser, but also professionally as a mediator and a certified divorce coach and consultant. So that's where Better Divorce Academy was founded. Better Divorce Blueprint was authored. The Thriving in Chaos Project is my podcast. And it's kind of like going back to my roots of wanting to be Jane Pauley. I'm able to interview people, which I love interviewing people, to bring out their best and show their light of what makes their genius zone so special and have them feel like they have a platform to contribute to others. So that is how I got from being a little girl in Boston to living and doing what I am here in Atlanta. Although I have clients in the UK, Canada, the US, 43 states now, the Caribbean, because I lived in Belize for 3 years, and Australia, because my editor is there and she's connected me with a lot of people in Aussie land. I did live in Belize, as I mentioned briefly. I'm allergic to snow, not fond of cold weather, was given an opportunity to run a spa and a yoga teacher training retreat center there. So Belize still has a place in my heart. I just came back from 2 weeks there, but Atlanta really is home now. There's something very authentic about Southern hospitality that I did not experience in Boston. Word up, people still love, my Boston roots, but it's waking up to warm weather most of the time is fills my soul with much more happiness than wearing socks and turtlenecks and shoveling. I'm not a fan of skiing. I know. I just dissed all you New Englanders, but yeah, they took the wrong baby home from the hospital. I was supposed to go somewhere warm, but no, I survived let's say 51 years of it. So here I am, love the work I'm doing. What's incredibly joyful is to be able to take somebody in my arms, and literally and figuratively, from the very beginning of vision with the divorce journey, because let's face it, divorce is not going away, Kimberly. Last year alone, there were 2.6 million divorces in the US. That's one every 13 seconds. And 70% of divorce is filed by women. And 2 years is the average amount of time that women internally contemplate divorce before they even tell their hairdresser, their BFF, their sister, their neighbor, anyone. They keep it to themselves. Divorce typically costs somewhere between $20,000 and $45,000 in legal fees, and now it's growing. It takes somewhere between 8 to 14 months in court if you have to go there, sometimes longer. On average, I work with clients 2 years, helping them through the contemplation phase of divorce, the survival phase of getting through it, whether they're able to mediate, collaborate, arbitrate, litigate, or heck, even DIY it. And then the really beautiful part is the healing and the transformation that goes in afterward. Should I change my name? What does dating look like? Dating in a digital world is scary. Where do I live? A career? Because many stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, I don't mean to be sexist here, I also work with men, feel like their identity is lost. Once you're married, you identify yourself as husband, wife. And once you have children, you identify yourself as father, mother. But that's really not who you are. Those are just labels that are thrown on you as identifiers with things that you've done in your life. Not to say that they're not important road marks in your journey, but really finding out your purpose is incredibly powerful. And I love the work that you do. I was trained by my yoga teacher, Rod Stryker, in the 4 Desires. I met him in the Kripalu Institute in the bookstore in 2011. He wrote a book called The 4 Desires. I highly recommend it. And it's about finding your Dharma. And Dharma is the yogic word. Don't forget, I'm an ERYT 500. I've studied a hell of a lot of yoga. Is the yogic word for finding your calling, your purpose, and being of service to others. So it walks you through what is Dharma, what is Artha, which is your means, what is Kama, which is pleasure, and Moksha, freedom. And it's something I learned 10 years ago and have trained hundreds of people in it, probably thousands now, but I've forgotten, mostly through yoga teacher trainings. And now through my students teaching it, it kind of gets infiltrated through the lineage that I'm in the Himalayan Institute with Rod. So I firmly believe in walking your walk, whether that be ballet, art, yoga, cooking, birthing, lactation, divorce, all the strange, interesting, bizarre things that I've done. I also love to help female entrepreneurs create sustainable businesses, because such a large percentage of them, as you mentioned in my bio, lose child support and alimony, and they don't know what they're going to do. How am I going to support myself? And your credit score typically goes down 60 points when you go through divorce, which is devastating. Most people don't qualify for a mortgage. And that is really scary. So I am here as a tireless cheerleader to walk through the fire with you, your advocate, support, resource, expert, whether I'm consulting and coaching or I am a mediator. This truly is my life's purpose. There's a reason I went through that 8.5-year hell. It's to be able to help so many others and make a difference in the world.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite a story and quite a journey. So let's say someone is contemplating divorce and they have, obviously various reasons for that, whether it be something severe like abuse or, whatever reason that they have. Um, if they came to you, what would be the first thing you would tell? Where would they start?
Well, that's such a wonderful question, and thank you for asking it. I wrote a 307-page book called Better Divorce Blueprint. And I wrote that book, as I mentioned briefly earlier, because I took a lot of notes. And there are 21 main reasons that couples' marriages fail. And they're not, exclusive, shall we say, meaning sometimes that you'll have more than one, but I'm happy to read through them quickly. And then there are 7 deal breakers. And that's where we start with the contemplation. Because if you have, let's say, 20 out of the 21 reasons, it's going to be much for you to know. And I say that slightly, sarcastically. I've never really met anyone that bad, but it's going to be much easier to do a litmus test of, can this marriage be in fact saved? So they are infidelity. And again, these are not in any particular order: money, lack of communication, constant arguing, weight gain or weight loss. I know that seems superficial, but true. Unrealistic expectations, lack of intimacy, lack of equality, not being prepared, because 50% of divorce happens between the 4th and the 8th anniversary. Abuse, and as I mentioned, there are 7 kinds. Addiction, different parenting styles, didn't marry for love, lack of disclosure or sincerity, lack of identity or self-esteem, irreconcilable differences. That's always the one we just use when we don't really know what the hell happened. Long distance, interference from parents or family, jealousy and insecurity, control struggles, and that usually has to do with money and children, and or your spouse is gay. That's always a little bit of a red flag there too. So if you heard that list, or you wrote those down, and I know this is a recording and it's in my book, so if you want a free copy, I'm happy to send it to you. It's also available on Amazon, but you can just email me at Paulette@Better Divorce Academy. The abuse issues are a little bit more nuanced, in the sense that some of those things I just mentioned can have abusive factors to them if they're not superficial. And when I say superficial, I don't mean they don't matter, but they're a little bit easier to heal because they haven't seeped in deep and to become a pattern. So if it's arguing about money, are you arguing about the groceries, or are you arguing about everything? If you can't go out and buy toothpaste without your spouse arguing or questioning you, you're going to start to keep secrets, because it just feels like you're being controlled. If you're arguing about, you just went out and bought a $5,000 whatever, then, maybe you're the one that is keeping secret. There's many different layers of that. If it's a matter of emotional infidelity versus sexual infidelity and there's layers of that. And I believe that anytime you are telling or sharing something with another person other than your spouse first, then there's a layer of being unfaithful. Meaning, if you get a promotion and your spouse is not the first person you call, then your spouse is going to start to feel that, well, why wasn't I involved in that? Or, at least celebrating the joy of it. So, and I'm not saying that you can't share something with the person standing right next to you in the moment of bliss, like, oh my God, that's so exciting. It's not like you can't share that, but I think everyone understands from this that there are in fact layers of that. But when it comes to just downright abuse, I always say to people contemplating it, let's look at the marriage and dissect how healthy it is. There are so many marriages that can, in fact, be saved. And I use air quotes with saved. That sounds like you're going to run in, throw a life jacket, and, give it an IV. But both parties have to be willing to want to be saved. There's an epidemic now of runaway husbands and walkaway wives, where the person just feels like, peace out, I'm done. And, I don't mean to, be like flip about that, but there is that feeling of just, yeah, it's run its course. I'm not willing to put in the work. I don't care if it can be fixed. And for those people, my heart breaks, because when one person is doing all of the emotional, financial, every aspect of the marriage to keep it healthy, it's really challenging and almost impossible to fix the marriage. But if there's abuse involved, and there are 7 kinds, as I mentioned, so physical and sexual get all the press, as they should. So if you have a black eye, a broken bone, if you are being pushed and physically harmed, that is physical abuse. You need to get out. Chances are very good that the perpetrator, will not change. Can it change? Yes, I have seen it, but it's going to take a major commitment and a lot of therapy, anger management programs to get through. Sexual abuse, anytime you feel physically coerced or harmed or manipulated and forced into having sexual activity of any kind, is not a marriage. It's unhealthy and abusive. So let's put those 2 aside. They're kind of cut and dry. There's really not a lot of gray area there. Now, when it comes to psychological, mental, emotional, those are 3 more types. So emotional abuse is when somebody is constantly making fun of you and negating your emotions. So whether you are happy or sad, or I don't know how many emotions are there, millions, whatever emotion you are currently feeling is either gaslit and said, no, you're not feeling that way. What are you doing? You're crazy. You shouldn't feel that way. When somebody tells you that you shouldn't feel something, it's abuse. If it happens once or twice and you say, no, I do feel that way, it's real. I feel it. We need to feel our feelings. And if we don't, and we're told not to, and over a period of time, I don't mean once, but historically it happens in a pattern that is emotional abuse. So mental is when you really start to question your sanity, when your mind is messed with, in the sense that you're forgetting things, or you're told that you're stupid or incompetent. Your facilities are questioned. Any of your mental capacities, your ability to do something, whether that be hold a job or parent or drive a car or anything that requires a cognitive skill, really wreaks havoc on our self-esteem. And then, of course, psychological, when you feel like the person, and there's many different psychological, and I'm not clinically diagnosing here, but there are typically 4. Number 1, right now, narcissism is getting all the press, but there's also histrionic, borderline, and antisocial. So those 4 different types of psychological behavioral problems, when your spouse has one of them, and they are, pardon my French, screwing with you in many different ways, whether that be triangulation, projection, as I mentioned, gaslighting. There's 35 different terms, and we don't have enough time to get into them. And I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I work with them. And if I don't know the answer, I know someone who does. So that is really when the psychological abuse starts to wreak havoc on you, which leads to your body starts to shut down, and you start to get inflammation, headaches, rashes, thyroid, ulcers, all sorts of inflammation in and out of the body, and your body starts to break down. You start to have the 14 different kinesthetic physiological systems in your body start to shut down too. So whether that be your kidney, and you'll get a kidney stone, or you'll get your adrenals will shut down, and you just have fatigue constantly. It goes on and on. Your eyesight might be affected. I got tinnitus from being in a very stressful relationship, long term. And again, these things don't happen overnight. They are a very slow drip. Like when you turn an hourglass upside down and you can see the grains of sand. It isn't like you just pour the bucket out. That's why we don't even notice it. And then you have financial abuse. So if you don't know where your money is, if you've never been allowed to look at a tax return, if you don't know that you even have a 401k, if your mortgage is not in your name, if your house is not in your name, if your car is not in your name, if you're controlled with how much money you can spend, and that doesn't mean living within a budget. That, they're two separate entities. I know a lot of spendthrifts that just like, yeah, I just want to be able to blow money however the hell I want to. But I'm not talking about that. But if you're really controlled and lived within an unreasonable budget, if your spouse and you are making, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and your budget is, $150 or $250 a week, it's like, what's going on here? If you're unaware of insurance, life insurance, health insurance, car insurance, home insurance, and you just don't know, you're in the dark. You're in a closet in the dark with no light, you know nothing. That is absolutely financial abuse. And it's one of the reasons marriages fail. And lastly, but one of the most important, I call spiritual abuse. And this is when your spirit is broken. It is when, much like when we get a puppy and we housebreak them, we need to train the puppy not to pee on the floor, or you'd be living in a pile of urine. And that's okay. We even need to train ourselves to do certain things, to have discipline, to have commitment and dedication in our life. But when your spouse is trying to break your spirit and lessen your I have a lot of Jewish friends, and I love Yiddish, chutzpah, as they call it, your charisma, your sparkle, Robin Williams has a quote, and, bless his soul. We're only given a certain amount of madness. We must not lose it. And that madness, as he would call it, is your spark. And if your light is dim and you're not able to replenish it, that is typically because every so often, maybe daily, maybe weekly, maybe more often, maybe less often, your partner is dousing your spark. You're not able to burn brightly. So that is what I call spiritual abuse. And for some, it could be also a religious aspect of it, a connection to higher power, God, universal energy, call it what you will. But if your religious values are not honored too, that will also be spiritual abuse. So your physical, sexual, mental, emotional, psychological, financial, and spiritual. Now, I go through that litmus test with everyone because that's where I start. And if you are feeling one of those problems, chances are you're either going to need couples counseling, individual counseling, or if you've already made the decision, I cannot stay in this relationship one more minute because I do feel diminished in one or more ways that we've gone through, then you really do need to get researched, get organized, understand your legal, financial, residential, mortgage lending, parenting, and rights to be able to make the best choices to go through, understanding that divorce is a process. It's a long process. And now with COVID, the courts are even longer. And sometimes we don't even get our day in court anymore. You get your day on Zoom. So that's where I start. It's not something we tackle in 5 minutes, but it's a really important foundation in which to build a successful outcome that maintaining your dignity and divorcing with dignity is important. If you go through it and you feel admonished and diminished, then I haven't done my job.
Wow. So when people come to you, what makes the difference between the ones where they can be saved, and they can't? And you did mention that, both people have to be in agreement, so that makes sense. But are there other factors that, so many times when we're in something and it feels hopeless, we can't see the answers of the way out? So, are there people that come to you and you think if you could just look at it this way, maybe it could be saved?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. I don't want this to be a doom and gloom interview, my dear. I am an eternal optimist. For many years, going back to my own personal story, I did a lot of self-study. In fact, it's one of the reasons I started studying yoga. As I mentioned, you know, how many people go to teacher trainings to learn that. I tried hard to realize or understand, contemplate, and really look at it, the big umbrella of what is my part I've played in this marriage that is not thriving, and what is my partner's part, and what is just, you know, circumstances. Sometimes it can be illness. It could be one or both of the partners comes down with cancer or an illness. In fact, a very large percent of marriages fail when they have a special needs child or an autistic child. You know, there's gradients of that. So I know I'm summarizing here. There could be many reasons why marriages start to crumble because of living in constant stress. So depending on the situation, is it infidelity? Is it abuse? Is it just we don't like each other? You know, that sounds really kind of like, well, what the hell are you doing together? But and I don't mean to say that, you know, marriage is not a commitment and isn't one. It is a sacred contract and a legal binding one at that. There should not only be a justice of the peace at the end of the aisle, or a priest or a minister. There should also be a lawyer reminding you, just so you know, this is a legal binding contract, folks. And if you're not down with that, I think we should just have a party and not get married. So, you know, I use my Boston sarcasm because it's so damn true. But we had this fantasy. So if both parties are not willing to come to the table, in my professional opinion, you cannot save the marriage. Both parties have to want to fix the marriage. And I don't mean it has to be exactly equal. You know, you might have somebody 100% on board and somebody 75% on board. I wouldn't give up. If they're 5% on board, you know, do you really want to be in a relationship where you're coercing, manipulating, convincing your partner to love you? No, I say, you know, it's a lot of work, and it hurts, and it is really less painful the earlier you could diagnose that. So if the parties are both on board and they can identify which of those things we just went over, and they're willing to work through them, there's a very good percentage that, yes, in fact, the marriage can be saved. I've saved them. I can think of one of my favorites where she came to me and said, I don't want to be married anymore. And I said, well, let's talk about why. And she said, well, there's this other person and I think I'm attracted to them. And I mean, nothing had happened. It was simply just, you know, a feeling, right? And long story made short, we talked about all of those feelings. She realized that the things in her marriage, she was projecting into this other person. And she had already stopped giving to her partner what it was she was now giving to this other friend, a person she'd known a long time. And I can't say severed the relationship, but changed the relationship, started giving those things back to her partner. And it changed his behavior, and they've been together another 7 years, very happy. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean to be a simplistic answer, but I see it a lot. And I myself was guilty of feeling like, I just don't want to give those things to them or him anymore. And I did change, and I read a lot of books and tried, but you know, this isn't to go on through to my personal situation, but with other situations, you know, it just depends on the level of secrecy, the level of not wanting to share all of yourself. And that means your 401k. That means the fact that you had a bad day at work, that the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you marry someone, you share all of yourself. Your finances, you know, your body, your emotions, your heart, your soul, your glass of water. You know, you have to be willing to share, and it needs to be congruent and parallel. When they're living, you know, the railroad tracks suddenly start going like this, there's a train wreck, right? If they're not in alignment. The train will derail, and so will the marriage. Can we get it back on track? Yes, to a certain degree if we fix it quickly. So I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did, but it is a process, and it's not. There's no roadmap, unfortunately, Dr. Kimberly. It's one in which you have to assess the marriage. Where are you? And do in fact both parties have a stake in and a desire to fix this marriage? That's where we start.
Got it. So you went through that 8+ year ordeal, actually getting out of a marriage, going through the system. But when I met you at the Buckhead Club, you were married and you were there with your husband. So how did you get the courage to get married again? And I would like to know the story about how you met your husband and how you even entertained getting married again.
Yeah, I had about zero, and I mean zero, interest in being in another long-term relationship. Um, I have been one of those women or girls that was never single. I cannot remember a time. I think I was 14 when I had my first boyfriend, and I always had a boyfriend, whether we broke up and there was another one, and I don't mean like there wasn't like a day or a minute or there wasn't, but I just always was. And it wasn't conscious. I had a boyfriend, and then just and before I was 17 when I met my husband, as I mentioned earlier. It's pretty young, and I had just turned 17 by 6 weeks. I was not almost 18. So, and then we broke up for a period of time, dated several men, trying to figure out what the heck am I doing? I was 20 and in college and very confused. Ended up going back with him, getting married 20 years. I myself had many emotional infidelities in my own marriage. Like I mentioned, that client, I just felt like I was not congruent and in alignment with my marriage with him. And when I met other people and there was a conversation that felt different, it made me feel like, so relationships can be different. And by the way, if you recall, my parents did not have a healthy marriage. So not to drag their marriage into it. And again, I'm not blaming them. But I didn't have that role model of like, oh, this is what a healthy marriage looks like. My grandmother was divorced. My parents should have been divorced. My sisters had healthy marriages, but wasn't really close to them. And my role models were different. So by the time I had gotten into the decision to divorce and get out, I had signed off marriage, just zero interest. So we had met during the craziness of our breakup of our marriage and our divorcing. And we broke up many times. And again, was uncertain about what does healthy dating look like. I didn't know. I needed to understand what it felt like to be in a healthy relationship where there were no secrets, where we felt congruent and in alignment. So when he proposed, we discussed marriage a long time. And he had also gone through as difficult a divorce as I did, but he went through a challenging divorce. It wasn't all butterflies and pixie dust. And there are some divorces that can be, and as a mediator, I facilitate them, but it was a very long process, Kimberly. We talked about it for years while we were dating. And I think the turning point for us was moving to Belize together. When we both made that decision to sell everything, to leave our childhood and our families and all that we knew, our careers behind, and move together as a cohesive unit and run a business together and live on an island in the middle of nowhere. And I mean nowhere, together. We made the commitment to each other to make certain that all of those 7 different types of abuse and all those 21 reasons did not manifest. And it never really did. That's how I knew that the relationship was healthy, because I'd been through, not just personally, but professionally, with helping and coaching so many other people through their marriages and their divorces, and seeing other divorces end in remarriages. And one of my favorite role models is an interview I did with a couple that wrote a book called My Happy Divorce. So Ben and Nikki are their names. So it is possible. So we've been married almost 4 years now. I know you've had the honor of meeting him. He is a gentleman in the most quintessential way I've ever known a gentleman. I could not speak higher about him. Neither of us are perfect. We are human and have our faults, but we absolutely are a team. It's been a work in progress. I will give you that. But if there's ever been a reason, people listening, to not give up on love after somebody who's endured what I did through my divorce proceeding, and am now not preaching, but just sharing that a happy, authentic, congruent marriage is possible, then there's hope for everyone.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, are there certain things that you two have agreed to do together every day, every week, just to make sure you keep that bond strong?
We haven't sat down and made an agreement. It When we met, this is a little personal, but I know he won't mind me sharing it. I don't mean the night we met or the day we met, but as we started to get to know each other, we don't really do a lot of talking. Like, we're not talkers. Women say an average of 70,000 words a day. Steve's probably more like 20,000. He's not a big talker. But when I put my forehead to him, I know what he's thinking. There's a little bit of this like intuitive congruency where, you just know. In fact, I remember saying to him, I feel like I met you years ago. Like, I believe in karma and that I probably already knew him. I also do believe that other family members have died and come back as other family members. So yeah, I know that's a little woo-woo, but bear with me. So we do commit to being fully transparent. We give each other enough space. We eat a meal together every day. We all together every day. My office is about 20 feet away from his. He's also a certified divorce lending professional, and he's a mortgage expert. So we work together in many ways, also professionally, because many people have a marital home. 70% of divorce involves the sale or purchase of real estate. And that is a very difficult thing, particularly in this market right now, where there is a complete lack of inventory and a lot of buyers and not enough sellers, low interest rates historically, and a very competitive market where divorcees do not set themselves up for success with being eligible for mortgages. So back in the day, I wouldn't have been able to help them. But now I can just say, hold on, let me see if Steve's available. I'll bring him in. I leave the room, let him do his magic, and works with the couple or the individual about their credit scores, their work, all of the things that they need to make sure happen in order for them to successfully be eligible to either do an equity buyout, sell the house at a later date when one or all of the children are out of high school, which is sometimes court ordered and quite successfully ordered that way. Or they both agree to sell the house and split the equity. There's so many different ways to handle it. It is not my genius zone, but it's his. So to answer your question, yes, we usually we always have rituals, and whether that be I drink collagen tea, he drinks coffee, but we have these rituals, and we just honor each other's rituals. We learn not to make fun of each other. There's no placating. There's no taunting. There's no teasing. Very little sarcasm. What we say is genuine and authentic. We give each other enough space. We honor each other's circadian clocks. He's Kapha, which is earth. I'm Vata Pitta, which is fire air. And even though we're both Leos, which is, another fire sign, we're different. I tend to be, when I get up, I am up. He takes his time waking up in the morning. It's you've got to honor your spouse and their little nuances and quirks and idiosyncrasies. And as soon as there's contempt and stonewalling, the marriage is going to be uncomfortable. So is a dating relationship. And never date somebody that you think you can fix. You can't.
Beautiful. Thank you. Great advice. So if people wanted to work with you, where can they contact you, and what services are you providing now?
Well, the best and easiest way is go to www.betterdivorceacademy.com. You'll know a little bit about my story, a little bit about why I do what I do, all of the services I offer, from one-on-one coaching to mediation services, court preparation, litigation preparation, career transformation services. I also love to help women write books, and men too. I actually just signed on 2 male clients to write books, so I have to stop saying women. I believe that everyone has at least 2 books hidden inside them that need to be birthed. You don't necessarily have to publish them, but I do believe that they need to be written to help you understand the process. So those are the ones that I love to start off with. I also love hosting retreats because of my connection to the Caribbean. I host retreats called Best Life Ever. They're divorce preparation retreats where women mostly come down, confused, scared, overwhelmed, fearful, go through the process of understanding, can the marriage be saved? If it can, great. How do we do that? And if not, what do we do to prepare so that we can divorce with dignity and make better decisions? The second category of retreats are those on the back end where they're divorced or almost. It's a process. Sometimes it's, well, we're just waiting for the paperwork and that type of thing. And they're really looking to start over. They want a fresh break, a new beginning, a fresh start. And they don't really know where to start. They're stuck and they're living in those ruts and habituations of the past. And I help them get out of them. So whether it's coaching, mediation, all of those services, it's a full service. That's why I call it Better Divorce Academy, because you need to get educated about the divorce journey. What does it look like? How do you get through it? How do you save money, save time, a lot of heartache, and some relationships that might get damaged along the way? It's a very important process and one that I take seriously. It truly is my life's work, and I take that responsibility with all 100% of myself. It is something I live for.
Beautiful. So just going personal now, what gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Knowing that I'm making a difference in the lives of so many people, and that the heartache that I've gone through, both personally with family issues of origin and marriage family, is being utilized to help and support so many others in high conflict, narcissistic personalities, situations. Client after client, I'm able to say, let's look at the language. So knowing that my story, my history, if you call it will, my herstory, right? Love that history is 2 words, his story put together, is becoming impactful. And it isn't something that I feel sad about. It's something that I am able to empower others about. And I'm also able to utilize a lot of my other education, whether that be wellness, to be put to good use. I always wondered, why am I studying all these things? And now I know.
Mhm. Yeah, it's all coming together. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And you've shared so many great ideas and tips and, things that I think a lot of people are wondering when they're in that situation. So thank you so much.
My honor. It's been a pleasure. I loved meeting you at the Buckhead Club. We both live in Atlanta and
Mhm.
are members. And what an amazing organization and a group of people. I've really thoroughly enjoyed meeting each and every one of them, including yourself. It's also nice to have a home where I can do in-person work too, as well as virtual. So I work, I would say 80% online and 20% virtual. So whether you live in the Atlanta area or not, no matter, I'm not location driven. Naturally, the legal, the residential, and the mortgage aspect of the divorce process is typically location driven. And I work with different professionals in each area. So I'm a member of the National Association of Divorce Professionals, Amicable Divorce Network, Fairway Divorce Solution, Vesta, Divorcify, a Divorce Town USA, Certified Divorce Coach, and probably 5 others I've forgotten. And so what gives me the Rolodex to be able to get the right team together, whether you live in the States or wherever, I'm able to create that team for you. I call it your A team. You're going to need it. And some people need 20 people in their A team. Some people only need one or two. It really depends on your situation.
All right. Thank you. Well, I have one last question before we finish. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
To listen to your inner voice. Don't ignore it. I myself ignored that voice as a little girl telling me to just pursue a career in what I really wanted to do, to say yes when you mean no. No is a complete sentence.
Mhm.
It just is. It's sometimes nice if you give an explanation, but sometimes it's not needed. But when you are not living in alignment with your heart and your soul, it's going to lead to misery. Not to say that we don't sometimes want to do things that we don't want to do to help and guide and support others. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're making decisions that are not in alignment with that inner voice, that spark that lives inside you, it's going to derail. So always listen to your inner voice, know what is in your best interest, and follow it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Paulette. And we'll talk to you again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dr. Kimberly. Such a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.